Hello and welcome to the PH and Nick Suns podcast, a merger pod that we were hoping we wouldn't have to do, but we do, even though the NBA All-Star game's going on. I'm your host, Greg Esposito, ahoy hoy, joined as always by Saul Bookman. Saul, I'm not going to ask you how you're doing because I have a feeling I already know how, but let's just get into it. Chris Paul out 6 to 8 weeks with a right thumb avulsion, which is a fracture of that thumb. And excuse me, I misspoke. He's not out 6 to 8 weeks. He'll be reevaluated in 6 to 8 weeks, which means we don't really know what the exact timetable for this injury will be and when we will see Chris Paul back on the court.
Yeah, it's not the greatest news you wanted to hear. You hoped it was just like maybe a jammed thumb or a sprain or something like that. But clearly, this is probably I don't know if it's as bad as it could possibly have gotten, but it's not the greatest thing in the world. I'll tell you that much right now. And just to let everybody know, I'm just going to read this so I don't screw it up. If you're unsure of what an avulsion is, an avulsion is a fracture that occurs when a small chunk of bone attached to a tendon or ligament gets pulled away from the main part of the bone. Doesn't sound great. It's usually common in hips, elbows, and feet. This is the rare instance where obviously it's the hand. Fortunate enough for me, I have a doctor in the family. I asked her what she thought about, what this could mean. And she said, well, there's two different scenarios and two different paths. And I'm not trying to worry everybody, but most of the time, very simple injury. You just need to rest it, ice it. And then at some point when the fractured piece comes back to the bone, obviously you start to heal. You got to work on that range of motion, which is what CP3 will obviously have to endure. In a very, very, very rare case, the fracture is too far away from the bone, and that will require surgery to merge the two back together. That's obviously something that we hope to avoid, and probably the reason why for the 6 to 8 week benchmark. And and she said she had that same injury, ironically enough, and she said that it was tough, but 4 to 5 weeks, she said she was feeling pretty much back to normal. So we're going to hope that that's the same thing for CP3. And as we discussed, I had a similar injury as well, and you can kind of see right here on the tip of my finger, I still have a fracture that has merged with the bone compared to this, where it's nice and flat right here. This is broken off. And I got back on the basketball court basically the next week. Now, non-shooting hand, shooting hand, different scenario. It was not on my shooting hand, so that's probably a little easier for me to deal with. Plus, I wasn't in the NBA, I wasn't an all-star, and I wasn't the face of the franchise or the second face of the franchise for a budgeting NBA championship team. So a little bit of a different scenario.
Were you a point guard, out of curiosity? Were you handling the ball on a regular basis?
I was.
So I'm just looking at this while you were talking. I was listening as well. But the NBA playoffs, all first-round series are set to begin April 16th or 17th, which, if I did my counting correct, is right at that, I believe, 7 or 8 week. I think it's the 8 week mark for this. So this is going to butt up right to basically the playoffs, which is concerning, especially if that second option that you said after they reevaluated is this thing has not healed appropriately. Now, my guess is if we get to that point, and this is pure speculation, but at that point, I'd imagine CP3 opts to play with the injury and deal with the pain and get surgery after the fact if he can play through it. But this is, it could be worse. Let's start there. This could have happened last week of the season, which would have kept him out 2 months of the playoffs. Right now, there's time to heal, but it is still not ideal, right? This is not what you want. If you could have had a perfect situation for this, this is as close as you can be. 6.5 game lead in first place, enough time for him to potentially heal before the playoffs, and a week left before the deadline to add players for them to be eligible for the playoff roster. So there's still an opportunity to be a player in the buyout market. But man, this is, I'm just gonna say it like it is. This sucks, right? You're
Yeah, it
riding
sucks.
high. It sucks.
Yeah, of course it sucks. It's not ideal, but you know what I'm not going to do? I'm not going to sound like every other shitty fan base out there that whined and cried about their star player getting hurt, and this is the reason why we didn't do as well. No, no, no. This Suns team was built on depth, and I will
Right.
sit here and say this until I am blue in the face. We're not going to see a lot point book because you did bring in some bona fide backups. Campaign is going to be expected to contribute at a much higher level, and and this is what they got brought in for. And typically, when something like this happens, the rest of the team understands they got to pick up their level of play. And I'm looking at two guys specifically: Campaign, when returning from an injury, and trying to get back into form and replace Chris Paul to a degree. And honestly, I never thought I'd say the day, but Landry Shamet. Landry Shamet has got to do what they brought him in to do and at least be a bona fide scorer to a degree which can be respectable for that second unit. If those two things happen, then I think this Suns team, listen, they got a nice, easy schedule this second part of the season. This is why you go 48-10 and build up all that, that leeway to give yourself a little room for error when you get down the stretch. And, I think they're going to be okay. I think they're going to be fine. I think they've done enough where they could probably hold on to the 1 seed. I'm not too concerned about that. You're hoping to play anybody from 7 to 10 could be, trash or hit a hot streak. You never know. So I'm not too concerned about it.
Yeah, you've built enough of a cushion that you're going to have home court in at least the first round, likely first 2 rounds of the playoffs. And if you fall out of that 1 seed to the Warriors, so be it, right? That whatever happens in that case. But Edward in the chat said Holiday, and I agree. Aaron Holiday, another guy that you made the move at the deadline, so you had depth in case something happened. Now you're gonna see it. The last time Campaign started a game for the Suns, he had 29 points, 9 assists. That was that playoff game, granted, but we know Campaign has it in him to step up and help this team. And there is, like we said, the buyout market. Goran Dragic is available on the buyout market. The Suns have half their mid-level exception available still, so they will be able to pay more than most teams that still are out there looking at it. There's a chance Eric Gordon could get bought out from Houston. Also, Dennis Schroeder. There's potential options that you can add still that can be insurance in here. I'm not going to hit the panic button. I actually think this could be where we see Aaron Holiday show what he really is made of. Be the backup to Campaign and put in some minutes that make you go, wow, this guy was undervalued in Washington. So these are all opportunities. But the biggest opportunity to me with this Chris Paul injury, and I'm sure we'll talk about it a lot this week, but I want to bring it up in this moment, is this is the time for Devin Booker to shine. This is the time. Guess what? We said if you have 2 MVPs, you have no MVPs. Well, right now, you got 1 MVP candidate on the court. And if he goes out there and for the next 6 weeks keeps the Suns at the win percentage where they're at, holds off the Warriors and gets that 1 seed and plays at the level we all know he can and have seen him play here in Phoenix, he could vault himself right into the thick of that MVP conversation. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
No, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I would also say that you don't have to worry about the Warriors as much or only the Warriors because the Grizzlies are right there as well. And I know everybody's worried about the Warriors and them getting Draymond and all the pieces back and stuff like that. But the Grizz are just are almost just as good, and they've picked up their level of play as well. So those two teams holding them off, and I agree with you, Espo. I think Devin Booker. Listen, we've talked about how come these two players are not being considered in the MVP race, and Devin Booker, without a doubt, has the opportunity to dominate the MVP race right now, being the best player on the best team. And if he holds it down the last 28 games of the season, there should be no doubt who this year's MVP is, because nobody has really solidified it to the degree of which you'd like to see. And Chris Paul and Devin Booker, unfortunately, have kind of neutralized each other in that conversation. So you can't really pinpoint which one's more important. Well, we're about to find out. And I would wager to guess that Devin Booker understands that. He knows that. And also the other thing that, listen, you got to look at the glass half full on this. I've been pounding the pavement, it feels like, for about 2 months about rest and getting rest for some of these guys. And Devin Booker's probably not going to get too much rest, but CP3 is. And CP3 is older. And CP3 wore down the stretch of the playoffs last year, especially in the finals. Good. This is a good thing, I feel like, for CP3 to be able to rejuvenate himself, get completely right, full health. Probably the first time he's ever entered the playoffs fully healthy and ready to go. And it's going to be magnificent to see him at full speed. I truly believe that this team is in a good position to thrive without him. They're going to have a couple bumps, obviously. I would expect those bumps to happen here in the short term, like the next week or two, while they kind of figure things out. But after that, I feel like they'll get into a nice little groove. They're just too damn good of a team to let this completely derail them. So I don't see that happening. I think they're going to survive. They're going to be fine. They're going to hold on to that one seed. And Devin Booker, man, it's his time. It's his time.
Yeah, it's definitely his time. And look, Fabio in the chat says, I think the center will struggle without CP3. I still think that Deandre Ayton can thrive with or without CP3. It'll be in different ways because you won't have Chris Paul setting him up, but he's another guy that now he has to step up, right?
Yep.
You're no longer the third option or 3A to Mikal Bridges 3B. You're now the second option in this offense. So he has to stand up and prove I'm worth the max by showing up. That's what great players do. So, he showed up last year in the playoffs when everybody said he had to. Well, Deandre Ayton's playoffs start now. He needs to be that guy. He needs to be that dominant center for the next 6 weeks and into the playoffs to prove that he is worthy of being the number 2 option on a title contender.
Absolutely. Hey, listen, a bunch of dudes need to earn their money right now. And Deandre Ayton, again, we've talked about it all year before the season started. You got to earn your money. And DA stepped up big time in the playoffs when he felt like, when the promise finally got into his face of possibly earning the max kind of money, and he knew other dudes were on the brink of getting the same thing. He showed up in the playoffs, and even Chris Paul thought he earned himself a bag. Didn't get it. Okay, here's yet another opportunity for you to step up, help this franchise, and really, more importantly, show the outline for what the future could possibly be like without Chris Paul, because eventually that day is going to happen. And if you have a core 4, and we all think that we have a core 4 right now in Book, DA, Mikal, and Cam, then this is a great opportunity for those 4 individuals to take over this team, dominate, and take them to another level, and a level that people didn't think that they could do without Chris Paul. And I think they learned so much in the last year and a half with Chris Paul in tow that they're going to be just fine moving forward, and obviously with Monty's leadership.
What do you think about Chris Paul's decision to play in this All-Star game? I mean, it's going on right now as we speak. He's playing minutes right now. Seems a little weird to me.
Again, it said reevaluated in 6 to 8 weeks. We don't even know if he's completely out for 6 to 8 weeks, right? Like, that's not official, right? Like, it just said that he's got a 6 to 8 week injury. Did I read that right?
It said he'll be reevaluated in 6 to 8 weeks.
Okay.
You can read into that how you will.
It says he has an injury. Says it's going to be reevaluated in 6 to 8 weeks.
Yes.
But none of that says he will be out for 6 to 8 weeks,
No, he
which
could
is
be out
usually what they
longer.
put in there, right? Well, he could be out. He might come back on Monday. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know.
I don't
I
know.
don't know
When
how
you say
severe this is.
reevaluated in 6 to 8, that usually means they know that that's the bare minimum a guy's going to be
Maybe,
out. But in the end,
maybe
it's Chris Paul's decision. It's his thumb, right?
I'm reading the tea leaves. I don't know. Maybe I'm wishful thinking here, but yeah. I mean, is he dribbling with his right hand? I don't know. I'm not watching the game, so.
Yeah. Look. If the doctor said, look, you can't do much more damage to it by doing this, and if you rest, then that's all that's going to wind up, getting this better, fine, whatever. Play in this for a minute or two, come out, so you can say, hey, one of the top 75 players of all time played in the game, tip his hat, walk out. I'm a little confused by it, though, quite frankly, because why risk, even if there's a minuscule risk of something happening to that thumb? But
No,
I know
I,
both they
I
they stated both teams are aware of this injury, which means guys
yeah.
likely won't be playing hard defense on Chris Paul.
No, they're going to let Chris throw a couple lobs and then call it a day. I would assume. Like, nobody wants to be that guy in an All-Star game for sure. And he's on Team LeBron. LeBron and CP3 are boys, and Monty's the head coach. Like, everything kind of lined up for Chris Paul in this way, as good as it could have been. So I'm not too concerned about this at all.
Yeah. Strikes me as a little selfish because maybe Mikhail would have gotten in, but so be it.
Oh my gosh.
So last thoughts. We'll get into this more heavily on tomorrow's scheduled episode. But how much do you think this genuinely impacts the Phoenix Suns' chances of winning the Larry O'Brien Trophy? Because in the end, that's all that matters this season. Nobody cares about how many regular season wins they get. It's all about, do they win the championship?
I don't feel like the only way, in my opinion, it would affect it is if he was out longer than 6 to 8 weeks. That's the only thing. But if he comes back, a couple days, couple games before the playoffs, or right at the playoffs, I think it will take them a kind of maybe half of a game to kind of get back into the flow of things, and then they'll pick up right where they left off, and it'll be no big deal. So Chris Paul makes everybody's job easier. It's much more difficult to go the other way, where you had to go from like CP3 to, I don't know, maybe an Elfrid Payton, because that was the only option you had. Yeah, things become significantly more difficult, but that's not the case here. They've built their depth. They've done a great job building their depth. They've done a great job of building the pieces around CP3 and elevating those pieces. And now those pieces have got to stand on their own without him. And I think that they put themselves in a position to do that.
I'm concerned from the standpoint of, if you wind up in the Western Conference Finals against the Warriors, and it goes to Game 7, and you have to go to San Fran and play in front of that crowd, that
That's not going
becomes
to happen.
immensely
That's not
more
going to happen.
difficult. But
They're not losing the 1 seed. They're not losing the 1 seed.
Yeah, the 6.5 games and playing as well as they did to set them up for it makes it more palatable, because they were prepared in case something were to happen.
In a worst case scenario right now, as we stand, you're talking about the Suns having to go 21-7 down the stretch to lose it, and the Warriors basically going 28-0. Okay. And so I just, with those variables in play, along with the Grizzlies, like, they're going to lose some games in the last. They're not going to go perfect down the stretch, right? Or at least you hope they don't. So I'm, in my estimation, if the Suns go 18-10 down the stretch, they'll secure the 1 seed. I completely think that's within their grasp. I think they have an easier schedule in the second half of the season to do that. I'm not so concerned about the 1 seed at all. I feel like they're going to handle their business.
Yeah, I mean, the math is in their favor. When you look at it as a whole, this could turn out to be a positive, as Buck Dog in the chat says. I think this actually helps our title chances.
Yeah.
Gives them a chance to learn to play without him, and without him bailing us out all the time. And that's a great point. You're going to have other guys step up in that clutch time. And that's, in come playoff time, defenses can take away that main guy. So the more you have in there that can help you and step up big, the better it will be. So we will be back tomorrow at 2 p.m. live here on the YouTube page. We'll be talking about the injury, hopefully get some medical perspective on it, hear from an actual doctor, give us some insight on it. We'll also give you.
Oh, you didn't like Dr. Bookman in the house today?
Well,
You didn't like how I broke that down?
so I do like how you broke that down. But the fact that that medical degree is from Cracker Jack U that you have, I'd
Yeah,
like to get a guy
yeah.
that spent 8 years in college to become a doctor or a
It was
gal. Doesn't have to be a guy.
it was the community college of the Nevermind. There you go.
Look, we'll do that. We'll take a look at everybody that could be on the buyout market for the Suns to add depth at the point guard position. Yes, the chat, we will talk about Goran Dragic as an option as well. And then we will look into what happened in the All-Star game. How did Devin Booker play? All that and much more coming up tomorrow, 2 p.m. live here on the YouTube page or wherever you get podcasts. So for Saul Bookman, I'm Espo. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Ahoy, hoy.